Hi, readers. My name is Dawn Hughes, and I'm the coordinator for Booktrib's book club program. I'm here today with Alex Woodard to talk about his novel, Ordinary Soil, a compelling story of a man's fraying relationship with the earth. That's such a great tagline. Alex's novel is one of the selections available in Booktrib's book club program for October. Thanks for taking a few minutes of time with us today, Alex.
Thanks for giving it to me. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So no spoilers, obviously, but what can you share about the novel that we wouldn't find on the jacket cover?
Well, I think there's a couple things that you can't quite communicate on the cover. One of them is just how layered this multi-generational story is. It's really quite, I went way back to the 1860s through the present day to tell this story. So there's all these layers of like family relationships, as well as the relationship between the human and the earth. So that's one thing that's kind of hard to communicate on the cover. The other thing is that there's like actually a ghost story running through the book.
Oh,
And
cool.
that was something that was hard to, the cover's kind of haunting, but it doesn't really get that point across.
Yeah.
But it's definitely part ghost story too. So when I was done writing this, I kind of had this vision of maybe if Steinbeck and Stephen King met in a bar and sat down and started talking, maybe this kind of thing is what they would come up with, because it's got that agrarian kind of rural community narrative going, but it's
Yep.
also got the ghost thing happening, which was not expected. That's one of these things that when you're writing as an author, sometimes things just come and you go with it. And that's what I went with. And it ended up being a very like integral part of the story. So those are a couple things that I think you wouldn't get from the cover. There's a nice Woody Harrelson quote on there, but he's not gonna tell you that.
That's maybe one of the greatest pitches I've ever heard in
Oh,
terms
well,
of
yeah.
I was like, check, I'm sold. I'm sold.
Yeah. No, it's definitely those, like those authors in particular, Steinbeck and Stephen King are very different stylistically,
Yeah, of
obviously,
course.
but they both have a way of bringing you in with language so quickly and
Yeah.
immediately, at least for me anyway. That's what I grew up reading, right? Stephen King and John Steinbeck in school and Stephen King at home. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's what I came up with when I was done. I was like, man, that would they might be proud of it if they got together, had a couple drinks, and whipped this thing out in the back of a bar in New Orleans or something. Yeah, I could see that.
No, I can see that too. That's awesome. It sounds like when you were talking about the multi-layer generational story, that itself is such great fodder for discussion. But why else would you say that Ordinary Soil would be such a great book club selection?
Well, there's so many themes woven into this narrative that I did on purpose, right? There's like the traditional themes of character and plot and family relationships and that kind of thing. But there's also these really broader, like much broader jumping off points about your relationship to the planet and what you eat and your health and that kind of thing. And the way that I wrote the book, it's a novel. I mean, it's historical fiction. Also, a friend of mine called it faction, which is a great way to put it, right? It's fiction meaning fact, right? So a lot of the ideas that are presented in the book are based totally on empirical data. Like it's all in the back of the book, actually. Like the back of the book reads like it's just a bunch of NIH studies, National Institutes of Health studies. But the idea was to present these ideas in a way that was more palatable and kind of fun and part of a story. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the big draws, I think, to book clubs, is that you can talk about, like I said, the more traditional themes of character and plot, but there's so much more in the narrative to talk about in terms of how it relates to you and how you're living, and maybe moving the needle a little bit in terms of how you see the world. That was kind of my hope. So I think that's the biggest draw of it, is it's got these normal themes of fiction that you find in fiction, but it's also got some very real world ideas to talk about. That's a friend of mine in Atlanta read the book, and he doesn't know much about ecology or soil. No, I didn't either when I got into this. But this thing sent him down a rabbit hole. Like he was texting me at 2 o'clock in the morning when I was long asleep, because he was so far gone, researching this stuff that was brought up in the book. So I think that's probably the biggest draw. Is there's a million jumping off points for discussion here, just depending on what the group's interested in.
It sounds like it. And I did not prepare you for this question, but what sent you down that rabbit hole? What was the inspiration catalyst for you?
I was on an island. I'm not making this up. This sounds like Tom Hanks in Castaway or something. But I was on an island in Fiji when the pandemic hit, right at the beginning, and like March of 2020, and nobody really knew what it was yet. And there was a guy on the island who called himself a medic. That's how he introduced himself to me. And this was a surf trip. So a lot of times these surf trips have medics there, like EMTs, just in case something goes wrong. That's how this guy introduced himself to me. About halfway through the trip, California shut down, and we all looked at each other like, oh man, something's going on here. And this medic offered to tell us what was happening, what a coronavirus was, and that kind of thing. So this guy gets up and starts talking, and there's no way he's just a medic. I immediately noticed there's something else going on here.
Yeah.
And when he was brilliant, and as he was talking about the coronavirus, he started talking about what he was doing with his life now, and he ended up being a triple board certified MD, who's kind of turned his attention to regenerative agriculture. And so I got home and I looked him up, and there is a video about the history of chemical and mechanical farming that he did a podcast with Rich Roll, and they animated it, and it's like a 15-17 minute thing. Yeah. And I was blown away. I was super fascinated because there wasn't it wasn't political. There was no opinion there. He was just saying, this is what's happened since the 1860s, and this is how it translates to our health. And so that one video is what inspired this entire book. And so when I got home, we had a few more things in common. We knew some people some of the same people. So I reached out to him. His name's Zach Bush, and we started a friendship. And then this book kind of came from that. So it was a collaborative effort with him too, because I would send him drafts and he would make sure I was on the right path with a lot of the medical stuff, which was not my wheelhouse. But that's how I got into it. I saw this video on YouTube, like so many of us, see videos and get inspired. And I was blown away. I was like, that's a story there that needs to be fictionalized, and told in that way, because I felt like we could reach way more people with the message if it was a fictionalized tale than just, a bunch of numbers. Because, not everybody wants to be sitting on a beach reading about a bunch of numbers.
Yeah. Fascinating. I hesitate always to ask that question because I know authors don't like it. Where'd you get it from? But that's a good one. That's a good response. So that's
great. I'd written, a lot of books before, and they were all kind of more memoir oriented or stories that I had some grounding in. This was not. This was a completely different experience for me, which I loved.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. I could talk about this book and you all day, but I do have to ask the question for readers. What's the best book you've read as an author? I'm sure you read. So what's the best book, fiction or nonfiction?
I just started. I never read War and Peace. And so I started reading it, and I'm like, I've been reading the same 3 pages over and over. Like, I can't. I was like, I wish I could tell you that was my favorite book this year, but I can't. Oh my God. Like, so I would say there's a tie probably between fiction and nonfiction. Bruce Springsteen was a huge influence on me as a songwriter, which is what I did before this. Yeah. And my life in general. There's the way that, he's been a big inspiration. And so his autobiography came out a while ago that he wrote, and it's super thick. And I love that because it was very lyrical. Like, the writing is very lyrical, like a songwriting, and really authentic. And I thought that was cool. And then the other book that I'm reading, I'm like 3/4 through it now, is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingslover. And I'd never read her at all, and never read that book, obviously. And a friend gave it to me for Christmas, and I finally started it over the summer. And then now I'll probably be finishing it in the next couple of weeks. And that is just, I just found out it won the Pulitzer. It shows you how like disconnected I am sometimes. I had no idea. Her writing is incredible. And that character, I felt like, if he'd been born in Oklahoma, he would have made it into this Ordinary Soil book we're talking about, because he's this guy that you root for, and the underdog. Like I'm always a fan of the underdog, like always. Watching football or whatever, it doesn't matter who's playing, it's the underdog. So that's why I'm loving that book so much. Plus, she's just, she writes so beautifully. It's really, really quite incredible.
Thank you for that. That's excellent. I have not read that, but I do love Barbara Kingsolver. So,
oh man, you should check it out. It's
yeah,
something
I
else.
will for sure. I know we have to wrap this up, which is unfortunate because I've enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for your time again. And for more information about Alex's book, Ordinary Soil, please check out the book club page on the booktrib.com website. Thank you.
Thank you.